Think of it as a tug of war over the rule of law, as Donald Trump and his allies try to pull in one direction, purging everyone and anyone, even dedicated lifelong public servants who have worked in both Democratic and Republican administrations, who have years and years, decades of expertise and experience in national security and law enforcement matters and the things that keep the country safe. They are now the targets of Donald Trump's retribution campaign. And they're starting to push back slowly but surely, creating that tug of war. We'll begin with news that a veteran FBI official was pushed out for investigating Donald Trump's efforts to overturn his 2020 election defeat. MSNBC's Ken Dilanian and Carol Leonnig report this, quote, FBI Director Kash Patel is forcing out the special agent in charge whose name appeared in documents recently released by Senate Republicans detailing the investigation into Donald Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election. The agent, Aaron Tapp, had been named to the post in San Antonio last year. He's a 22-year FBI veteran. He specialized in fraud and financial and cyber crimes, according to his LinkedIn profile. Tapp was kicked out, ousted, after being singled out by a right-wing account on X as being somehow related to the 2020 election probe. This week, Senate Republicans also released documents, including subpoenas, that show that investigators looked at the records of members of Congress. Donald Trump and his allies have been spinning rather frantically that is proof of some sort of criminal wrongdoing on the part of the investigators and special counsel Jack Smith, but there is no evidence of that. And if there are subpoenas for the records of members of Congress, it is because those members of Congress were tied to Donald Trump's efforts to overturn his election defeat. Friend of this program, former U.S. Attorney Barbara McQuade, puts it like this, quote, of course DOJ investigated members of Congress who talked with Trump on January 6th. To fail to do so would have been a cowardly breach of duty. If Trump and his allies are slowly purging any internal resistance to their retribution agenda, the external resistance to their plans to turn DOJ into a tool to prosecute their enemies and not much else is ramping up as well, particularly from those high on Donald Trump's enemies list. After challenging the appointment of the U.S. attorney who brought charges against her over the objections of the previous U.S. attorney and the prosecutors in her office, New York Attorney General Tish James is now pushing back against the U.S. attorney who's investigating her for bringing that blockbuster civil fraud case against the Trump org. New York Times reports this, quote, New York's Attorney General Letitia James is seeking to block a Justice Department investigation into her office's civil fraud case against President Trump by challenging the legitimacy of the U.S. attorney in Albany. The effort to block subpoenas issued by U.S. Attorney John Sarcone's office is sealed. The subpoenas are part of a criminal civil rights investigation into two of Ms. James' most high-profile inquiries. The civil fraud case against Mr. Trump, in which she sued him, accusing him of exaggerating his net worth to defraud lenders, and the office's long-running case against the National Rifle Association. New York Times previously reported that Mr. Sarcone's investigation is focused on determining whether Tish James' office violated Mr. Trump's rights or the rights of others, an unusual use of civil rights law. Donald Trump's war on the rule of law, defined now by a steady streak of purges of public servants and a push to remove any trace of efforts to hold him accountable, is where we start again today. MSNBC senior investigative reporter Carol Leonnig is here. New York Times investigative reporter, MSNBC contributor Mike Schmidt is back with us. Also joining us, former assistant special agent in charge at the FBI and MSNBC national security and intelligence analyst Michael Feinberg is back with us. He's also a fellow at Lawfare. Michael Feinberg, I want to start with you because I never want the frequency of you being booked when the news is another high-level expulsion at the FBI. I don't think those stories should become numbing, but there are so many of them. I wonder if you could sort of unflatten this act, this removal of this 22-year veteran of the FBI.
Of course. Look, I'm always more than happy to be on the show on the network, but it is generally not a good sign for our country as a whole when you need former officials to comment on the slow erosion of the rule of law and constitutional norms on a near daily basis. The removal of Aaron Tapp as special agent in charge of his field office is one more in a long train of abuses against what the Justice Department and the FBI is supposed to stand for. He is being removed, supposedly, and Carol will be able to speak to this even better than I will, for his role in some of the investigations against the now president. But, this removal has been firing up my phone for the past 24 hours pretty nonstop, in a bunch of chains between me and former colleagues and current friends. And it's important to note Aaron wasn't really involved in those investigations to a granular degree. He was in an acting role, is my understanding, as the assistant director of the criminal division, while the FBI, of which the criminal division is a part, was investigating the president. But the notion that he was some sort of puppet master or string puller for this investigation is, based on everything I've heard, 100% false. This is just yet another callous destruction of a civil servant's life for the sole purpose of throwing red meat to a political base.
And would Aaron Tapp have reported directly to Christopher Wray, or were there layers between Aaron Tapp and Christopher Wray?
So I think, and Carol can correct me if I'm wrong with this, at the time in question, he was an acting assistant director, which is a position that has regular access to the director and more frequently to the deputy director, but there still is a level of management between them in the form of executive assistant directors, which is a position that Kash Patel has done away with.
And Michael, would Christopher Wray have known who he was? Would he have interacted with him? Would he be able to speak to his responsibilities and his role and the things that you're articulating, whether or not he freelanced or whether or not he was simply following facts in an investigation ordered by the director of the FBI?
Yeah, look, as a special agent in charge, Aaron Tapp was one of 55 what we call division heads in the field, individuals who are running a field office, whether as a special agent in charge or an assistant director in charge. They had regular meetings as a group over video conference with the director, another tradition that Kash Patel has ended. They would speak to the deputy director regularly. This is somebody who would have been known on what we refer to as the 7th floor of the Hoover Building, which is sort of the internal shorthand for very senior FBI leadership.
So Christopher Wray, who counts among his personal clients, Chris Christie and other Republicans who may or may not still be in good standing in MAGA world, would be able to defend this 22-year veteran's conduct as simply being that which was directed by him, the then director of the FBI. I'm just trying to put my finger on what's missing in the near daily appearances, as you just pointed out, on this show, on this network. And what's missing is that we cover the purge that Kash Patel seems to be carrying out, and he even nods to the lawlessness of some of these firings. But what's missing are the people who ordered the men and women of the FBI to do the things they're being purged for doing. And this one feels particularly glaring.
Yeah, and look, it is... there's a lot of people who fit in that category. I mean, I think I voiced my opinions yesterday on former Director Wray's silence, but let's not forget that the original special counsel under Robert Mueller was set up by William Barr, Rod Rosenstein, Jeff Sessions. Those were the individuals who created it and oversaw it. They have been resolutely silent in defending things their own department oversaw. I can't explain it. I really don't understand it, other than to say I think it is an immense failure to leverage the leadership values that all these individuals would claim they possess.